Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Shivaya, Shiva Om, Shiva Om, Om. Welcome to another satsang with your host, Chuck the Yogi from the Yogi Cave, as we get closer and closer to this winter solstice, which does have a great significance because Saturn is conjunct Jupiter during the solstice, which hasn't happened in several hundred years, and has great metaphoric import. So, considering the fact that 2020 has been so significant as it is, this just adds to it another layer of significance. Anyway, let us continue. So, where was I? I think it was 3.34. Hridaya Chitta Sambit. Through constraint on the heart, he gains understanding of the nature of consciousness. Why is that? Because it was understood metaphorically that the heart is the seat of consciousness. Now, it's supposed to be somewhere down here, Mahara, point of gravity, somewhere below the navel, where the Atma is located. The heart, metaphorically speaking, is kind of right there in that area. And the heart also, metaphorically speaking, is that center of gravity between the higher and the lower chakras. So it has a deep connection to the nature of consciousness. In many cultures, and in the Indian culture is or the Sanskrit or the Vedic culture, it's no different. 3.35 Sattva Purushayor Adyanta Asam Kirnayoho Pradyaya Avishesho Bogaha Para Artat Vat Svarta Samyamat Purusho Jana. Experience is a presented idea which is based on non-distinction between the absolutely unblended self and sattva, through constraint on the self's own purpose, which is distinct from other purposiveness of nature. Knowledge of the self is obtained. So Patanjali is becoming an engineer of consciousness again here, and he's talking about the nature of experience. And why does he get into that? What's his purpose in getting into the nature of experience? Well, he wants to break things down to help the yogi understand what it is the yogin or yogini is to do. In order to do that, he has to be able to define each term in very precise ways. So he does the same thing with the term or notion of experience. And he states that it is a presented idea which is based on the non-distinction between the absolutely unblended self and sattva. So what does that mean? Well, sattva, the unblended self, is the big self with a capital S, and sattva is that state of matter, because again, we got sattva, rajas, and tamas, right? White, red, and black, and sattva is that state of matter or consciousness. Let's make no distinction in this moment between the two, where there is the most clarity and the less obfuscation and the less barrier, so to speak, or filter between the little self and the greater self. So this is why it's so important for yogis and yoginis to preferably be in a sattvic state of mind. So that idea is that this experience is the notion of this. Basically, he's breaking down the idea of the spiritual experience, the samadhi, which creates that, or establishes, or reveals that union between the great self and the smaller self, through a state of heightened consciousness, a sattvic state. So that's breaking that part of it down. And through constraint on the self's own purpose, which is distinct from the other purposiveness, of nature, knowledge of the self is obtained. So the self, oneself, prakriti, in a small way, a small prakriti, me, or purusha rather, the small purusha, me, the little self, and nature. So understanding and placing constraint on one's own purposiveness. God, I'm having trouble with that one. By placing constraint on one's understanding or one's purposiveness, one's sense of purpose, then one can understand by default the purpose of nature. Because again, yoga in particular is a very self-centric type of philosophy, but it also sees the intertwining between Purusha and Prakriti. And basically what he's saying here is that by understanding oneself, one can understand nature, because one is a product of nature. Therefore, self-study helps you by default to understand nature. Anyway, that was a mouthful. And that word right there, I'm not very familiar with, so 3.36 Tataha Pratibha Shravana Vedana Adarsha Asvada Varta Jayante. Thence occur flashes of illumination in the sensory areas of hearing, sensing, sight, taste, and smell. So this is very common for a yogi to hear. It's not tinnitus, to hear certain vibrations, to see certain phenomena when you discount any medical issue whatsoever, and to taste certain things, and so forth and so on. I'm not going to get into too much detail about that because we can be talking for hours about that, but it's something that helps the yogi or yogini understand that they are on the path of yoga. So let's put it that way. 3.37 Te samadav apasarga vyutane siddhayaha. These are obstacles to ecstasy, but attainments in the waking state. So, in other words, it's very easy to get caught up in these phenomena. You know, people that study the occult and get really caught up in the occult and magical powers and all this other stuff, it's really easy to get caught up in that and stay in it. So what Patanjali is saying, he's saying this is a danger, but at the same time, it's understanding that one is attaining in the path of yoga, but it's not the ultimate goal, right? It's easy to get caught up in that stuff and stay in it, but it is not the ultimate goal of yoga. And all throughout the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali's made it very clear that the ultimate goal of yoga is the great samadhi, right? Anyway, let's try one more perhaps. 3.38 Bandha Karana Shaitilyat Prachara Samvedanach Cha Chitasya Parasharira Aveshaha. Through the relaxation of the causes of attachment to one's body, and through the experience of going forth, consciousness is capable of entering another body. Now, this can be very fantastical. You can get into the siddhis as far as like these supernormal powers and so forth and so on as far as yoga is concerned. And Shankaracharya is well noted for being one of those who did so at some point in order to win a debate. And Shankaracharya is the founder of what we understand now as Hinduism. He's one of the great organizers of Hinduism. But I'm not going to get too much into that. The idea is that one can understand by projecting one's consciousness, one can project that consciousness into an object or into another person. Whether metaphorically or in actuality, I'm not going to get into that debate. But the idea is to be able to understand the nature of consciousness, right? And to the extent that one can understand that, one can play with that. And this is why it is stated that the construct that we live in is God's play, or Leela. So I can go on for hours about that, but I'm just going to leave it there. Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Shivaya, Shiva Om, Shiva Hum, Om. Jai Ma. Jai Mahakal. Till next time.